Over the past 2 months, there's been lots of coverage about the Nintendo Switch. The hype surrounding it, the pre-orders, all that jazz. And I want to give my 2 cents as to what I think about all of this, and considering what we know so far about the Switch with the directs and the games that have been announced, I believe it's time to give my thoughts as to what I think about the Nintendo Switch and why I think things may be looking up or down for the future of the system at this point. And I know people are going to disagree. I know people are going to say things like it's too early to make a video like this, since it is quite likely that the Switch is not getting released at this point in time, and it's gonna be released on June 5th. I hear you, but I want to make my 2 cents now, as I don't want to delay this any further. Trailer, I had some mixed emotions. I had some mixed reactions when it came to the particular hardware of the Switch 2. And I really just want to say them now because I have some very strong opinions about it, and it's time that I talk about this. So, when I first look at the direct at the Switch 2, or when I look at the first look trailer at this particular console, I think to myself, this is just an overhyped Switch Pro. And it is. It really is. Because it's supposed to be an improvement. I get that. I really do get that. But when the Switch 1 had all those models, the Switch Lite, which I'm probably not gonna mention until this point, because the Switch Lite is something entirely different in and of itself. But what I'm gonna get into is the OLED model that Nintendo really boasted about back when it first released. And the OLED model was made to have a bigger screen, right? And it boasted about all these different features, that Nintendo was gonna bring to the table. But I think when it comes to the OLED, and when it comes to now the Nintendo Switch 2, where were these changes when the OLED first released? Where was voice chat? Where was the thing for online with the features in the OLED model? Where was all this that Nintendo boasted about in the Switch 2 features trailer, where they announced, the online play, the voice chat, all that stuff? Where was that? Where was that in the OLED days? Where was that? None. And considering that the OLED was made to be this big thing where it was bigger screens, bigger everything, but Nintendo chose to not give that chance to let the OLED model be an improvement from the original model of the original Nintendo Switch. And it's sad. It really is sad. Nintendo really missed the mark, really dropped big potential that could have been for the OLED model. And it's so frustrating to think about that Nintendo chose to do this to its fans at the point where, these small little changes could have been something where it could have benefited a previous model from a previous console that, that is probably the same thing as like a 3DS, with the 3DS family of systems, you know, the big improvements of the 3DS, which is the 3DS XL, the 2DS, the new Nintendo 3DS, you know, those consoles, you know, like those are meant to be improvements. And the same thing had happened when the original Nintendo Switch came out, you know, with these particular family consoles, you know, with the Nintendo Switch Lite, the Nintendo Switch OLED model, you know. Those are meant to be improvements to the original model of the Nintendo Switch 1. But Nintendo really just missed a big opportunity in and of itself, and it bums me out. It really frustrates me to a point where, you know, Nintendo could have done more. They really could have done more with the Switch 1, and they just waited until now with the Switch 2 to begin to get those changes into action. When it came to the original Nintendo Switch's title lineup for games, I really thought, you know, that it wasn't really gonna be much. And at the beginning, it wasn't. Because, you know, it was still young, it was still something that Nintendo was trying to add at the time. And, you know, I didn't have much faith when it came to the Switch's one lineup of games. But during the end of the life cycle for the Nintendo Switch, the original, we got some really good games in the mix. Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Mario and Luigi Brothership, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Luigi's Mansion 3, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, a new Pokemon game, don't know what, Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu, some really great titles in the mix, even some third parties. I guess maybe Street Fighter 6, I have no idea with the third party titles, I haven't checked honestly, but the lineup for the Switch 2 is looking pretty good so far, I'll say, and they got some pretty interesting picks, you know. The first party titles are great as always. The popular first party titles like Mario, Zelda, Pokemon are still there. Kirby even, you know, they're still there. Kirby Air Riders is looking like a good game. A new Pokemon game is great on there. Mario Kart World looks amazing. Zelda looks amazing as always. And, you know, they brought in some third-party titles in the mix too. Elden Ring, Diablo 4, a new Halo game, even Final Fantasy 7, which is really great to see, honestly. And, you know, I really like that Nintendo is really learning from the mistakes that they have done with the past with the Wii U, because, you know, with the Wii U, they didn't really push the third-party titles. And I know people say that we don't speak about that, right? We don't speak about that, but I'm bringing the Wii U into the mix here because, well, it was kind of a failure from the very start with third-party titles. First party was very successful, but the third party wasn't all really there. But like I said, Nintendo is learning from their mistakes, and it really shows. It really shows. Because, well, you know, I really like that Nintendo is branching out into other territory besides their first party titles that are really, really so popular. So good on Nintendo, honestly. The internet has gone completely crazy when it comes to this topic, and I don't blame them, because this is probably the biggest complaint across the board among people who are in the YouTube scene and among people who are commenting on videos about this particular topic. And I gotta say, Nintendo, are you crazy for making people spend $70 to $80 to buy your products? You know, amiibo is gonna cost like $40, I heard recently. And even, you know, the other stuff, you know, like Joy-Cons and just the Pro controllers in general are gonna cost maybe $45 to maybe $60. You know, it's crazy. And I gotta say, you know, that's just terrible. And even the games are gonna cost like maybe $70, $80, or at most 90. And you know, Nintendo, at the end of the day, I gotta say this to you, you know, and you're probably not gonna understand this from somebody who hasn't been, you know, in programming, who hasn't been in development, or who hasn't been a designer or any of those professional things, you know. But you need to stop raising the prices, because people who are interested in buying these games are gonna be turned away because the prices are so ridiculously expensive. And you know, people are really wanting to buy physical and digital product. And if you're gonna charge these prices, people are gonna start taking a look at these prices and they're gonna go, why are they so expensive? And you're gonna turn away an audience of people that are interested in buying these games, or new people who are wanting to get a new experience that in all honesty could interest them. But making these to the prices they are just gonna turn them away. And it's the honest truth. And I get that inflation is a problem, but seriously, physical and digital games are not supposed to be this price. And Nintendo, you need to take a hard look before you make decisions like this, because providing something cheaper is not going to hurt in the long run. It's not going to hurt in the long run. And I think people have been sick and tired of your antics of the prices, because people are starting to get sick of it. Look, Nintendo has been in the game market for who knows how long, and they've been still going strong for a very long time. And with the Switch being announced and their new games and stuff, I'm really hopeful that the Switch will be very successful. And while there are still some particular things that really concern me, and just some things that really need improvement, I'm still really certain that Nintendo will be successful in the long run with this console. And I think there is potentially gonna be a price cut somewhere in the near future, because who knows? Only time will tell with them. And we don't ever know with Nintendo. They probably will make an announcement doing that anytime soon, because it's Nintendo.